So today we're going to talk about TFC, and we're going to specifically talk about what went wrong for Chris Armas during his time with TFC. And usually whenever there's a head coach that's been fired, and this season with Chris Armas become the first head coach to be fired this season, I usually do kind of like a reaction video. But rather than doing that, I thought let's go deeper to see what went wrong with his tenure. And I know a lot of people are not surprised that Chris Armas was let go by TFC. Like, when you literally went through the worst loss in franchise history, you knew something's gonna have to change. And especially even before this worst loss in franchise history that they suffer against DC United, the writings was definitely on the wall. Like, it was getting to a point where if there is going to be one more catastrophe loss, which we saw in that game between DC United and TFC, Chris Armas was out of the door. But still, even with that, I think I'm kind of a little bit surprised how quickly that TFC decided to pretty much get the chopping block out and pretty much axe Chris Armas immediately, because it's only 11 games into his tenure. And I've said this before, it is very rare we see teams immediately fire their head coach after taking charge of this team this quickly into the season. Like, even some of the worst head coach that I remember, guys like Brad Friedel, Michael Starhay, Anthony Hudson, all those guys, they didn't get fired until their second season, and those were just terrible head coaches. Like, if you look at their record, it is absolutely abysmal. And really, the only head coach I can remember when he is taking charge of the team in his first year in MLS that got fired this quick into the season is Alan Koch back in 2018 with FC Cincinnati, or actually it was 2019 with FC Cincinnati. And even then, Alan Koch was with FC Cincinnati before, when Cincinnati basically jumped from the USL to MLS. So for me, it kind of didn't count because he was already with the team, and it's kind of unfortunate that he didn't really kind of adjust to the style between USL and MLS, and I really don't blame him for that, because the USL Championship and MLS, there is a huge gap between both of these leagues, and it's unsurprising that a lot of players that might be very good in USL, or even coaches that do well in USL, they tend to struggle once they come to MLS, because again, it's a huge gap between that. So yeah, again, something has to be catastrophic. That is the reason why Chris Armas immediately kind of got dismissed. And it's hard to also believe that he never even made it to be leading his team to play a home game at BMO Field, because remember, all this time TFC has been playing their temporary home game down in Florida, and it's kind of sad the fact that he never made it to BMO Field and never get a chance to coach this team in front of the fans for the very first time. Now, to look at the record that TFC has, it's an abysmal 1-2-8 record. They've scored 13 goals this season, but conceded 27 goals so far. Obviously, the 7 goals that they conceded in the last game has a lot to do of the fact that they have now conceded the most goal in MLS right now. But even that, before they conceded the 7 goals, their goals allowed mark was relatively high and was one of the highest in the league. And this is a team that is not known for bad defending. Like, when you look at these past couple of TFC teams, these teams have been very good in terms of the defensive mark. And when you also look at the defense that they had, a lot of these guys were still part of that team that almost won the Supporters' Shield last year. And it's kind of a big surprise of how much that back line has fallen to ruin in just such a quick time, and now have conceded the most goal in the league this season, and they have a goal differential of -14, which I believe that's also the worst in MLS. And it's unsurprising they actually have now the worst record in MLS right now. Now, in terms of the start of the season, and people forget that Chris Armas, his start with TFC actually got off to a great start, because the first game that he was in charge of this team wasn't actually in an MLS game, but in a CONCACAF Champions League game. And I talk about how I didn't think TFC had a shot again against Lyon, because Lyon is the defending Liga MX champion, and knowing the fact that TFC was basically injured to hell, they would literally had to require a miracle for them to move on. And that said, miracle actually happened, because when they go down to Mexico, despite the fact that they went down 1-0 early in the game, they were able to kind of get very fortunate to get get a goal back. I think it was an own goal that one of the Lyon players scored, an amazing own goal that was able to give them the away goal. But nevertheless, it was kind of miraculous that they were able to not only walk away from Mexico with a draw, but they were able to walk away from Mexico with one away goal, and that was huge heading into next week. Because heading into the next week, this was also another game where I thought it was virtually impossible for TFC to win. Like, they were literally playing the TFC2 team in this game against the defending Mexican champion. I thought they were going to get completely destroyed. And yet, they won 2-1 in that game to move on into the quarterfinal. And this is when I thought, not only the fact that Chris Armas has done a great job with this team, but this is just some sort of great resilience that I don't think I've seen in past TFC team, where even a TFC2 team can be able to beat the best of Mexico. And it seems like things were going to go well for this team, and maybe they kind of proved me wrong of what I said earlier this season, where when you look at this team, they really do not have a lot of depth. Like, once some of their stud players get injured and once they had to rely on those second string players, that's when this team is going to fall apart. And at least in the beginning of the season, that was not going to be the case. But then, just 3 days later, after that historic victory, they lost 4-2 to Montreal. And, I will give them a pass in terms of that, because I did say that, that was definitely a very dramatic moment and certainly a historic moment for TFC able to beat a Liga MX team. But you just wonder, are those highs of emotion is going to get to them, and they're going to have a huge letdown heading into the next game in the Canadian Classique, which indeed that was the case. They lost 4-2 to Montreal, and they were really never in this game. Like, at one point, they were down 4-1 in this one. Then they drew 2-2 against the Vancouver Whitecaps for the following week. They play in the quarterfinal in the first leg, and unfortunately this time they don't have the similar miracle that they had against Lyon, against Cruz Azul, where in the first leg they were beaten 2-1 at home, and this game was taking place in Tampa. And then the very next one, they lost 1-0 on the road to Cruz Azul down in Mexico, which, even with that loss, I didn't think that TFC played badly in that game. And, to be able to be competitive against what turns out to be the eventual winner of Liga MX for this season, that was a pretty good showing for TFC. But then the very next week, they kind of still suffer from that moment where they feel like they were in good shape, and then they of course lost to the Red Bulls 2-0. But also, this is kind of the point when the season where I can maybe use these teams that are not doing very well so far this season in CCL and use that as an excuse. I mean, we've seen so far this season with a lot of the MLS team that was in CCL, teams like the Union and the Columbus Crew, they struggle coming out of the gate, but now they're starting to get much better. And the same can said about the Portland Timbers, although the Timbers, that is another team that is kind of treading water, because they also have been dealing with tons of injury, and maybe even more injuries than what TFC is dealing with right now. But the very next game, they were able to win 2-0 against the Columbus Crew, finally getting their first win of the season, and Chris Armas finally getting that weight off of his shoulder of getting his first win for TFC in MLS. But little do we know that would be his only win that he would get for TFC in MLS, because the very next weekend they got a 1-1 draw out of that one, which wasn't that bad, because for majority of the game NYCFC were by far the better team, but they were able to squeeze out a 1-1 draw out that game. But this is also when the wheels really start to turn off, and this is when the downward spiral began for TFC, because the very next week they lost 1-0 to Orlando City. Before the very next week, they lost 2-1 to Columbus on the road. Then at home just three weeks later, and this was during the time when we had the international break, and you were thinking, with how bad TFC are heading into the break, this was a much needed break for them to maybe regroup themselves and maybe get some of their guys back healthy. And in fact, some of these guys like Pozuelo started to get back healthy to this team. And also they recently got Jefferson Tauto, who I know he didn't really play in some of these recent games, but at least you could see some of the promise that he has. And you're thinking maybe TFC can get themselves back to normal and start to make a run after this break for them to get regrouped, right? Well, no, because just the first game coming out of that break, they lost 3-2 to Orlando City at home before losing by the same scoreline against Nashville SC, and this was probably one of the big signs of when a lot of TFC fans want Chris Armas out, because when you literally blew a 2-0 lead in you, or not 2-0 lead, but you blew the lead twice in this game, and also give up 2 late goals to lose 3-2, or actually no, you know what, I just realized I got the wrong score here for this game. They did not win 3-2 in this game. It was Nashville winning 3-2 against TFC. But, you know, when you blew the lead twice and also give up 2 late goals to a guy that hasn't scored a single goal heading into MLS, you know that there's going to be some anger in terms of TFC fans. And also, this is also getting to the part where they were sinking lower and lower into the Eastern Conference table. And then the very next week, this was probably the lowest point. At least that's what we thought at that point, when they lost 2-0 to FC Cincinnati at home. Like, you know, I know FC Cincinnati has got a little bit better this season, but that was just embarrassing. The fact that they were just played out of the park by FC Cincinnati all team, and this is when really the anger started to come from TFC fans and demanding Chris Armas to get out of this team. And then on July 3rd, this was the final nail in the coffin. A 7-1 beatdown suffer for on the road against DC United. This team was 3-0 down after just 20 minutes into the game. Like, when you have that, like, when I saw that kind of score line, you know, I was kind of surprised, but at the same time not surprised, because, you know, I mean, insert that meme says disappointing, but not surprised in terms of my reaction when they went down 3-0, because, you know, I thought maybe this team can pick it up a little bit after they suffer that horrific loss against FC Cincinnati. But you just kind of feel like this team just checked out, and they definitely checked out in the second half too, because as soon as they gave up that fourth goal to go down 4-1 and then got the red card, it just feels like they weren't playing for Chris Armas anymore. In fact, I would say maybe this game was the game where they stop playing for Chris Armas, and basically the next one was kind of the same thing, although in an extreme case, because they got absolutely destroyed in that one. And again, you know, this is kind of a result that not only is the worst loss in TFC franchise history, but it's also kind of a loss that I knew something's probably going to have to change. And this is also what I said in the review, where I have a feeling not only Chris Armas could potentially get the axe, but the same can go without Lee Curtis, because besides the fact that Chris Armas is one that is under a lot of fire, the same goes with Ali Curtis, where a lot of TFC fans demand him to get out, because he knows that as long as he is still with the team, he's going to keep Chris Armas as long as possible, because they're basically cigar buddies there that is in the helm, which, you know, that I think that's also another kind of a surprising thing, where Chris Armas was let go, but Ali Curtis was not, which is kind of surprising, the fact that Ali Curtis actually had the might to decide to fire his cigar buddy. But that's what happened after this instant, and this is where we're at right now in present day, where TFC 1-2-8 and have only scored 13 goals while conceding 27 goals and have a minus 14 goal differential, and they have only got 5 points to their name so far for this year. Now, in terms of the top goal scorer this season, you got Iowa Kinola with 3 goals. He's no doubt having a regression so far this season after his incredible first year with this team. Followed by Jonathan Osorio with 3 goals. Then you got a long list of players that only have 1 goal for the team. That followed by Josie Outdoor, Michael Bradley, and Richie Larea. And then the top assist leader, Michael Bradley, leads the team in top assist leader with 4 assists, followed by Patrick Mullins with 2 assists. And, you know, no disrespect toward Michael Bradley and Patrick Mullins, but when you have Michael Bradley and Patrick Mullins as your top assist leader, and the guy that is basically contributing the most and pulling the string for your attack, you know something has gone terribly wrong in this team. And it's also unsurprising why for most of these games this team really struggled on the attack and struggled to score goals. And then, of course, after that, you got a bunch of guys with 1 assist, guys like Aro Jr., Marquis Delgado, and Omar Gonzalez, all with 1 assist. So now let's talk about what actually went wrong with TFC under Chris Armas' reign. And, you know, I actually put 5 reasons why things kind of went terribly wrong for Chris Armas doing his time with TFC. And the first thing is something that I mentioned before, is the lack of home atmosphere that other MLS team has that TFC does not have. And the same goes with the other Canadian team, that is Vancouver and Montreal. And I know a lot of people will say that is kind of just used as an excuse, but I really think that's not the case. I mean, when you have a situation where this team has been pretty much been not only playing on the road but also playing in a environment that they're not actually, they call themselves the home venue, and also been training in a different area, it's gonna take a toll in terms of the psychology of these players. And you can see some of these players are already physically and mentally tired of the fact that they have to play it down in Florida and have to play in an unfamiliar area and not be able to play in front of their fans. And I think this year it even has a more extreme cases, because at least last year, TFC, at least they did play a couple of games at BMO Field, and sure, yes, it was without fans in the stands, but even playing at your home stadium, it does give this team a little bit of a morale boost. And sure, yes, for the rest of the season they of course play in Hartford, but again, at least this team play at BMO Field for a couple of games this season. They haven't even got a chance to play at BMO Field. And add to the fact that, I mentioned all the other MLS team except for the Canadian team have already have fans allowed to be back in the stands. That also adds into the more frustration and the more just kind of mental toll that it can take to your players. Because imagine if you're a player and you have to play in an empty stands in a different places, and you with no fans, and you see other teams that have already have fans in the stands and they get to play in their home market. That has to be really, really demoralized. And it's also no surprise when you look at not just TFC, but you look at Vancouver and Montreal. All three of these Canadian teams are right now below the red line and not having really good season, mainly because they've been pretty much playing on the road pretty much for every single game. And that includes some of the home games that they have where they're playing a temporary venue, and that temporary venue, even though they called it that as a home venue for them, it really isn't kind of a home venue for them. So yeah, I just feel like for people that say it's an excuse for saying that the fact that the team is bad because they have a lack of home atmosphere, and say that is an excuse, I don't think that is the case. Like, I would give you an example of saying, like, imagine if you're a person that is studying abroad, and basically this whole pandemic, of course, happened, and you're not allowed to return home. That's what this is basically is for all these players of the Canadian team. And in fact, that example was actually a good example, because that's been something that a lot of people has been dealing with, where some people might have studied abroad, and then of course the pandemic happened and they weren't allowed to return home for a very long time. It's the same case for a lot of these players, and all the mental stress that they have to deal with, and you can definitely see that it started to really took a toll on them. But the next thing that kind of what went wrong for TFC under Chris Armas, and also all these things I've mentioned, not all of them are actually Chris Armas' fault. So this one, I don't think this is actually on Chris Armas, but the next one it is. And that, of course, is the press that he used. Now, we know Chris Armas likes to use the press when he was with the Red Bulls, and he seems like he wants to implement the same system with this TFC team, which, at first, I think this is going to be tricky for him to try to do that, because this is a TFC team under Greg Vanney has not been a team that has used the press system them often. I mean, there tends to be more of a possession team. They tend to be a team that have a lot of possession and trying to play you out of the door. And that's just the press system that was introduced to this team. I thought it's going to take a long time for this team to get used to, because it's a new system for them. And it is pretty clear that when you look at some of the losses that they suffer, this press system clearly is not working. And you would think that maybe eventually they would start to kind of improve under this press system. It's not. I mean, when you look at the result, it just feels like it just gets worse and worse. And it just gets to a point where it's almost like these players don't want to play under that system. And this is also when maybe is the reason why a lot of players started to turn on Chris Armas, thinking that, we don't want to use the system. We're not used to it. We want to go back to the system that Greg Vanney used to implement it. And when you have players that doesn't buy into your system and doesn't buy into the philosophy and the team talks that you give before the game, and also during the halftime whistle, that's when there is a serious issue. And this is also when the phrase losing the dressing room is pretty much being input, because it's pretty clear that Chris Armas clearly started to lose the dressing room when the players don't really even want to play under him anymore and doesn't want to use the system that he currently wants to implement to this team. Now, the other thing that went wrong for TFC under Chris Armas is turmoil not only on the pitch but off the pitch. And I mentioned on the pitch where the players don't want to play under Chris Armas' pressing system, but also off the pitch we heard about the situation with Josie Altidore, and I have a feeling when this announcement was made, I bet Josie Altidore must be celebrating being out there. I mean, not only celebrating 4th of July, but he must be celebrating and have a huge sigh of relief that he is actually no longer, that Chris Armas is no longer the head coach of this team, because there was definitely some turmoil between Chris Armas and Josie Altidore. And obviously, we haven't seen Josie Altidore play a single game or even been on the 18 ever since that situation. And you wonder, with a new head coach, maybe he is going to be getting back to this team. Now, I know Josie Altidore, as he is started to get older, his goal scoring contribution basically started to go down, but it's still in a way where he is a lethal threat for this team going forward. And you just always hate to see when there's a situation, especially if it has to do with one of your star player, where there's a turmoil or a disagreement that has happened between them or a front office person, or even in this case the head coach. And now it seems like Chris Armas have clearly put Josie Altidore in a doghouse, and you basically just bench one of your best player just because you just haven't got along with each other. And that also kind of does sometimes play into the locker room too, where I know Josie Altidore, he might have a very polarized kind of a way to, but he's still kind of a leader to that team, and he's a veteran player that definitely can lead this team. And without him being there, you can definitely start to see maybe a lot of the players might be actually maybe trust Josie Altidore more than actually what Chris Armas is doing. And this is also where I get to the other part of this is another reason where Chris Armas started to lose the dressing room a little bit, and where it seems like the end was definitely near for him during this time. Now, the other reason what had went wrong for TFC under Chris Armas, obviously the injury bug has been bitten this team hard, and I'm not going to kind of talk a lot about this one because I've mentioned it many times before, where when this team does not have their best player in the starting 11, this team is going to really struggle because they just do not have any depth whatsoever. And speaking of which, that's also the next reason. Not enough depth in terms of this team to replace the star players that they have to this team. And in some way, I wouldn't put this on Chris Armas, but more like this is where I get why a lot of TFC fans really hate Ali Curtis, because he clearly construct a team where it's basically a team that you better hope that all your player can stay healthy, or else you are going to really struggle. And I know TFC have spent a lot of money on their roster, but still, to not have enough depth and just really hope and pray that all your star player can stay healthy throughout the entire season and still have a decent year, that is a huge gamble, and a gamble that not a lot of teams in the league are able to pay off by the end of the season. And we're starting to see an effect where as soon as an injury crisis has happened, it's unsurprising to see this team has really struggled the way that they have. And the fact that they did not bring reinforcement and bring some depth signing to this team to add the depth in this, or even maybe signing the wrong player in terms of the depth. I mean, they have tried to add a couple of players in terms of improving the depth. One of the players that I know that they kind of signed was supposed to be a high profile name in MLS that can help with the depth chart is Kamar Lawrence, but unfortunately that doesn't seem like it has happened, because Kamar Lawrence has probably the worst season in his career in MLS right now. And again, this is all about not making the correct signing, and also a combination of just not adding enough depth to your team. And now you're starting to see why this team is starting to kind of play like a TFC two kind of side, and the fact that they pretty much are suffering the same fate that happened back in 2018. Remember in 2018 when they finished ninth in the Eastern Conference? It just feels like they didn't learn from their same mistake from that year, where when you do not add enough depth and you heavily rely on basically your starters as being the only one to contribute in terms of making this team great, you're going to be in serious trouble. But yeah, there you have it. That is pretty much it in terms of talk about this video, talk about what has went wrong for TFC under Chris Armas and why exactly he decided to get let go. And again, it's going to be very interesting to see in the future how this team is going to look. Obviously, there's no doubt that they're going to be under an interim head coach right now, but we'll see who exactly they're going to be hire next. And I think whoever they hire next, that is a huge decision that this front office and especially Ali Curtis have to make with this team, because if he hires the wrong guy again, he's going to be basically get the he'll be the next one to get the chopping block. And I guess maybe another reason why he hasn't been let go of that is Ali Curtis is that he did have the courage to decide to fire a guy that he really likes and move on to another player or another head coach. And he has given like that one pass where, okay, you hire a bad head coach, we'll give you a pass on that, but if he get it wrong again in this next one, then I won't be surprised. He will also be the one that could be let go along with another bad head coach that takes over this team. But yeah, it is quite incredible how much of a fall from grace that this TFC team has had, and a team where we thought in the beginning was supposed to be maybe they're bad because they were in CCL to now just kind of continue that cycle and now being the worst team in the league. Like, how many people predicted that this team was going to be the worst team in the league? Like, I know a lot of TFC fans, even though when they did not like Chris Armas and him coming into this team, nobody, including themselves, believed that they were going to be the worst team in the league, as we're now 1/3 into the season. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what direction this team is going to go in the future when they do get a new head coach. But let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video? If you're a TFC fans, I mean, what's next for this team? Is this team able to turn around after such a disastrous start to this season? But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.